Again, ladies and gentlemen, please do join me in extending a very hearty welcome to all our session speakers. I'd just like to correct myself. Ms. Nupur Gupta is a senior transport specialist from the World Bank. Our session chair, Professor Mohan, is Professor Emeritus from IIT Delhi. He is a recipient of the Distinguished Alumnus Award from IIT Bombay and Distinguished Career Award from the University of Delaware. His research includes transportation research, safety and pollution, human tolerance, biomechanics, and traffic safety. So with these words, may I now request Professor Mohan to kindly make his opening remarks and chair this session.
Thank you very much. Welcome back. Welcome back from your lunch. I suppose rest of the people will trickle in slowly. Since all the speakers have been introduced, I won't introduce them so that they get more time to speak. Please keep to your 15-minute limit, because I was just requested, if since the conference is running late, if you could speak for 10 minutes, but I stood up for your rights. If they've come to speak for 15 minutes, they will speak for 15 minutes. So since I've saved 5 minutes for you, please don't exceed the 15 minutes. Our first speaker is Mr. Guido Brugmann, public transport expert. Please, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I was asked to speak about public transport innovation, and I thought, well, definitely there are some people talking about ITS, IT, and definitely also about vehicle technique, developments, innovation in buses. So I thought, well, let's put innovation in a little bit broader context. It's the purpose that we not forget that innovation is not only about technology, it can be viewed in a broader perspective. And if we want to innovate, we need also to know what is actually excellence in public transport. Because if we know the gap to reach this excellence, we know also where we need to put attention to. So I will talk about excellent public transport and then pick up 5 topics, which besides IT and vehicle technology are 5 topics which I see as very important in the development of public transport. And innovation is not a goal at itself. Please keep that in mind. Public transport needs innovation, but for a clear reason. Because we need to attract more people to public transport. Unfortunately, sometimes we have to say innovation isn't just needed to keep our market share, because we are in a competitive environment, a growing economies, so people maybe shift to other transport modes. And of course, secondly, we need to provide services, public transport, in a more efficient way. There is always a pressure on cost in public transport. If we want to keep it affordable, in the same time improve quality, we should provide efficient public transport. Always the game to increase revenues on the left side. Also benefits, because we have benefits in terms of the environment, which is a social impact, and we have the cost reduction. Let's also not forget that innovation has a purpose and its focus in the end of meeting the needs and expectations of customers. And these needs and expectations will become higher and higher in this society, also whereas our growing income. And innovation is not something like a new device. And the whole public transport industry was laughing about electric buses. It will never ever happen. Well, we will see. But it's not easy in public transport to bring innovation. And also it's not easy because you need competition, which is not always there. You need to have an appetite for risk-taking and change, which not everybody likes. and there is an important role of politics and policies. If it's difficult for the bus industry to enter India, then probably we will not have much competition and not much innovation. So there are many to play a role in innovation. A central government, which should provide a good framework for innovation. The transport authorities, which should be driven by a responsibility to provide better public transport. We have transport operators who should be driven by, and I stress that, regulated competitive environment, which is often not there, and therefore an absence of innovation. And of course the transport industry, supply industry, which should have to work in a global competitive environment, where we have many good examples of. So if we see cities with excellent public transport, I name some cities here, we always ask ourselves, so this transport in London or in Amsterdam, Vancouver, Madrid, Rio de Janeiro or wherever, why have these cities perceived as excellent public transport? And what can we learn from it? What is actually the secret of the success? Because if we know also where we have areas for innovation. And you will see this is not only about technology. Well, the first is that these cities are well organized in the metropolitan level. They all have a transport authority. No city nowadays in the world can work without having a transport authority coordinating all and integrating the different modes of mobility. There is a regulated and supportive appropriate legislation. And even, believe it or not, innovative legislation exists. Well-defined financing schemes. There are robust contracts with transport operators focusing on delivering quality. They have an integrated approach towards mobility. And integrated, that's a key word in public transport nowadays. We want integrated information. We want integrated ticketing systems. And we want integrated urban planning. So integration is something what is becoming extremely important. We need, of course, this supported by political courage, strict implementation of policies and plans, because only bringing plans forward doesn't help. It's all about implementation. And of course, innovation-driven are these cities every day again. So of course we have innovation, but we have organization, legislation, financing, and all you can put the word innovative in front of it. We have also innovative contracts. We have integrated planning innovatives. So innovation is much broader than only a technology. As I told you, I will pick up quickly on 5 topics, which is my personal selection of things, and probably the least you would expect that I come up. To start with, that is innovative contracting. And why I mentioned that, since in the European Union, covering nowadays 28 countries, legislation is in place where public transport can be only operated when a public service contract is in place. That has driven to a lot of innovation, because there is a competition on quality. So that's why most of the buses shows up with Wi-Fi, passenger information. But we see a lot of areas where the bus operator is awarded a contract because he comes up with the most innovative solutions, and solutions which are really in the benefit of the customer. Ticket integration. Well, e-ticketing, I think it's the second biggest innovation in public transport of the last decade. And it's about one card for public transport. What people want is one card which you can use on all public transport, regardless if it's metro or bus or metro. I can use it for the taxi to pay. I can use it to pay my parking. I can share my car. I can do shopping with it. This is where really innovation is going to take place, a real platform like this animal. It's an advertisement from the city of Bremen, where you can be a pig, a chicken, a sheep, a cow and a goose at the same time. This is what actually integration of ticketing means. And it makes travel much easier than having every time to think about what kind of ticket I will use. And probably we see also payments through mobile phones. This is not a matter of technology. You can introduce tomorrow an integrated ticketing system here in Delhi for train, metro, bus, because technology is not the problem. It's all about cooperation and organization. Because there are so many companies offering ticketing systems, that's not the issue. But if companies don't want to integrate, don't want to cooperate, then it will become difficult to have such system. Well, I mentioned the second biggest invention was e-ticketing of innovation the last 10 years. And I came to that I read a very nice quote. Someone was saying that the most important transportation innovation of the decade is the smartphone. It was a very interesting quote to think about. Because of course the transport sector didn't invent it. This is actually how we can use technology in our public transport sector. So a lot has been achieved by all kinds of mobile applications. And it's great, it's nice, but it's not everything. And the risk is, with all these mobile applications, that we still forget that we need basic information. Because we still need information at stops, in the vehicle, before we travel. And not everybody has a smartphone. Maybe in some countries, not in every country. And a smartphone does not help always to find your way in public transport. 80% of the cities in the world does not have even a network map. It's like saying 80% of the restaurants in the world does not have a menu. If I don't know how to find my way in a system, how can I expect that people use public transport? So, still there is a good reason to look in signage and wayfinding, especially at stops. A stop is more than putting a pole in the ground and saying here is number. No, we want as a passenger constantly to be reminded and giving comfort, yes, I'm at the right stop, when is the bus coming, and preferably, as right on there is dynamic passenger information. As I said, in a restaurant I get a menu, I would expect at a stop also. A route number is not sufficient. So these are nice examples from Santiago or Abu Dhabi, where I have a bus stop which provide me with all information where I have to go. At interchanges, we like to know where our bus is going, a good example of Hong Kong. In metro stations, we should provide information where I can find what buses if I leave the metro station, and I like to have it supported by a map where I can find my information. We have further improved stops and interchange facilities. It's already meant bus stations, interchange facilities are not up to standards. Again, this is an example of an interchange, well designed, comfortable, clean, and last not but least, safe. So, in Paris, they are working on the bus stop of the future, project of also UTP. It's a little bit overdone, and I don't ask you immediately to come with a bus stop of the future in India. The only thing is, the bus stop is where you enter your bus. It's actually the window of your shop. If that's not safe and clean, why I should use a public transport system? Last issue is, of course, urban planning. And I brought it up because there is a lot of talk about smart cities here, also in India. Nobody knows what a smart city is, but it's smart. I give you a very personal definition of what I think is a smart city. Well, a smart city is a city designed around public transport. It's probably even different from TID. It mentioned a mindset, because when this office building was built, it was already in the design. Someone thought the tram should have a stop inside of the office building. This is thinking away for it. It's thinking already in a time, and not building first and then try to adapt to public transport. So we built also smart cities in the Netherlands, where I'm from, because we're making cities out of water, by making water, land, and then build cities. So this city was in 1977, and the urban master plan for this smart city, when it was built, the plan was made, the yellow lines were already, that were becoming the bus routes, but also the bus lanes, and actually there were busways. So actually what they did was actually first design public transport, and then this neighborhood of this city was built around. So this is one of the areas what they started to build, and the first thing they built was actually the bus lane. Nothing else was there, you can see, but the bus lane is the first you do. So what you get is actually a bus lane only dedicated for public transport in a city. It's actually common sense. I do not even mention it a smart way of designing, it's just common sense. So everywhere you will find it, and in the city you fill the separate lanes. This is in the city center, only dedicated for buses. Why? Because it was designed. The same is for shopping centers. This is a photo from a shopping center taken from the top of it, but actually buses are just going into the shopping center. On the left side is a parking garage, on the right side the bus is entering the shopping center. Why should actually a car be allowed to park in a parking garage in the shopping center and a bus not entering the shopping center? So the bus enters actually the shopping center and has his stops, equal rights to the parking. So there are a lot of things we can think, and this is my conclusion and last slide, is how we can innovation apply to every aspect of public transport. Not only technology, it's about ideas, it's about mindset, where we should think every day again, what can we do better for public transport? Governments, operators and industry, we all have our responsibility. And last but not least, not everybody will like it, but competition may encourage innovation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next, I will request Mr. Rado Skender to speak less, because he has to go to the airport very soon. So why don't you go ahead right now?
Thank you very much.
Hold on, can you, which one? This one, right? 5. No? No. I'm this Lessip, no? Lessip. Okay. Okay. Good day, everyone, and sorry for this slight technical glitch. From my side, I think I had a consulting meeting with my colleague, but I think our presentations are very much in sync. I would like to continue where he has ended and focus more on how to utilize the technology, actually focusing on passenger, customer, not just deploying technology because it's technology. Now, my name is Rado Skender. I'm coming from Lessip company out of Japan. We are market leader in Japan for fare collection system and intelligent transport systems. But today I would really like to focus on another side of the story. Since significant investments are taking place, and I believe in many cases technology has been proven to improve significantly the service levels that the operators and the governments can provide, but there is still significant loop to be closed between the technology constraints and actually what are the business needs. And actually reimagining how the passenger experience is handled by technology and by the information that operators provide. And I believe it requires not just the technology, but paradigm shift, how the technology is implemented and operated. So this is very general slides. There is a lot of technology that can go into the bus, from fare collection to Wi-Fi to managing how many passengers enter to having eco-drive enabled and so on. But the point out of all this is that how the technology end of the day is utilized and how it's positioned toward the passenger and what improvement actually it brings. Now if I look from the perspective of passenger information systems, if I call them like that, so today any UBS2 compliant bus in India probably would be able to do the pre-on-bus stop and real-time travel announcements. It would have a omni-channel distribution, meaning it would have some web portal. It would have a bus stop distribution information. To a certain level, it would be able to do performance control. What I mean by that is you would know your headway, you would know your schedule adherence. And there is a significant shift into fare collection, as well as based on the data collected, then optimization and analytics. Where we see the next big step is actually the personalization of these technologies towards the customer, towards the passenger. And I use the same quote as my colleague, as a smartphone being the most important innovation in the last decade for the public transport industry. It's always there, it's always connected, and it actually enables personalization of the information towards the passenger and their journey that they're taking now, as well as the case that was mentioned, there are no maps available, there are no traffic information available and similar. What the world has proven is that crowdsourcing is a very strong mechanism, and people are very much willing to contribute the data to enable themselves and the others better travel experience. So why we need to do personalization? One is the appeal, and the second, to remove the uncertainty. I always give example, and we deployed a lot of technology in Singapore, for example. But one thing that always bothers me is if I go to the bus and I am not a resident of Singapore, if the bus doesn't tell me next stop. I mean, I don't know which is next stop. And I don't use the bus for that purpose in Singapore 100% because it doesn't tell me next stop. I don't know where to exit. So how to make the travel easy for visitors, tourists, for impaired people that have hearing problems, visual, and other problems. So communicate the customers and make this seamless data exchange for the better quality. I use always this example of Uberization, and just yesterday when I was in Hong Kong, they raided their offices. So it's one of the services that is not greatly appreciated, but I think what it brought to the passenger and why it has enormous amount of followers is the way that it approaches the passenger. So when I request the service, I know who is picking me up. It's Peter the driver. He has 5 stars, so means that other hundreds of users said he is a good driver. And I can give my opinion about the journey instantly after I finish the journey. And there is absolutely every technology today deployed in the bus that enables to do completely the same as Uber does for their own service level. And what we call this is micro navigation. So the most of the applications that are developed today are focused on this macro navigation level. So what is my journey? And I come to the stop, I can see the arrival of my bus. And there is a very simple technology that every smartphone has, and most of the buses deployed in India or anywhere in the world have. It's a Wi-Fi. So meaning when my phone connects to the bus Wi-Fi, I receive my information. I receive my announcements in my language. For example, for Hong Kong, we have deployed initially announcements in 3 languages on the PA system. but how to deploy them in Japanese, Portuguese, and every other language. So people have to select, and I listen in my language. And on smartphone, it's very easy. My video, my estimated travel time, my transfer information, because the screen, the big screen that is inside the bus, if it's present, it will show for everybody the most general information. I will not receive my information. And of course, one of the key things that is also happening in the world is the mobile ticketing. I live for the last 15 years in Japan, and I greatly admire Japan public transport to be able to have mobile ticketing from 2003 because of the certain political elements that happened. But the rest of the world, I believe, is very quickly picking up, and having a personalized application that connects to the bus and is able to personalize everything. Also the ticket is a very important element of that. And what is the benefit to the operator? I know exactly which users were on my bus, where they were, where they exited, where they entered the bus, and I know exactly how they rated the trip. Because after they exit the bus, application can easily ask them, how was the journey, how was the driver, how was any element that you want to know at that particular point of time. So one is extended reach of information. The second, directly accessible and visible on my device. I don't need to look over 3 people to see the screen above me. It enhances significantly the image of the bus I am on, at least I believe so. And it enables the convenience also of the mobile ticketing. And I call them $1 million questions, because if you look at the agencies, they spend millions of dollars on passenger opinion to justify why investments were made in the buses. So those opinions, for example, we use data mining tools, we mine for Twitter, you send the survey teams outside, but with a very little tweak of technology that you already have today on the buses, you can capture that without this being tweeted to the whole world to see that the bus 65 had a very lousy driver because there was a lot of jerky braking. And they get answered on your system and by users that you can actually identify who they were and where they were. And another improvement that it comes is, since the wealth of information, having the system is that you can start planning your services and table designs based on what the user's feedback and not what is assumed by the systems directly. One of the biggest shifts we believe is actually switching from scheduled and fixed slack in the schedules to actually having a real-time schedules that fit the users. You know, a lot of performance contracts that are introduced today introduce punctuality on the start point or similar very unnatural mechanisms that of course help certain level of users, but they never capture the passenger experience. So if the bus was late, maybe 10 of the passengers were more happy it was late because the driver was nice to them than that they were on the bus that was just speeding and the journey was very unpleasant. So, and another, which is I think UITP, one of the main agenda, I think for us vendors is also extremely important. Open and standardized data. We are sharing a lot of our data and we keep to the global standards, and we believe that innovation will come if everybody does the same. So in conclusion, transport is extremely important, but also information about the transport are key information because they're impacting economic sustainability and every other element. And India has done a lot on standardization or introducing the standards in the public transport, but this is just my personal feeling. On some level they are very unnatural because they put the technology just because of technology inside, not the technology to actually fit one of the purposes. And I just outlined one small purpose. We can go over hundreds different. But if the standardization continues, I believe it has to follow a certain path that it aims the experience of the passenger, and it improves the service levels that are delivered end of the day to the passenger. I hope I was in time. This is very short from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Skender, for saving us 2 minutes. May I invite now Ms. Nupur Gupta to make a presentation?
How does it come on? Oops. Do I have to press all functions? How does it show up on the screen? How does this transmit to the screen? Has it come? Okay, good. Hello everyone. I'm not a technology person. I'm just going to talk about the experience of ITS in urban bus services. Yeah, and I want to emphasize urban bus services because I want to draw this distinction up front that just having done ITS on long distance bus operations does not mean it qualifies you or your vendor to be a good candidate for urban bus systems, because they bring certain peculiarities including higher service levels, higher frequencies, and it needs, those specific areas need special attention. I'm just quickly going to run through the World Bank's engagements in India in the ITS area, some preliminary thoughts on what we think about ITS and MIS, and then get into the experience, the results that we've seen in some cases such as China, Urumqi, and then move on to, in a little bit more detail, on the Mysore experience which we have supported with the KSRTC. The World Bank is currently engaged through two major projects. The Sustainable Urban Transport Project, which really seeks to promote good practices in urban transport. This project works with 5 cities and 6 projects. These are the Pimpri-Chinchwad Bus Rapid Transit System, Hubli-Dharwad BRT project, Naya Raipur BRT Light project, more for the connectivity between the old Raipur and the new Raipur, Mysore ITS, a bike sharing project in Mysore, and Indore ITS. The second project that we have recently started is the Efficient and Sustainable City Bus Services project, where we realized that most cities didn't even have basic bus public transport, forget mass rapid transit systems, and so it's really an attempt to try and showcase modern bus systems. And here we are working with 4 cities, and these are Jaipur, Chandigarh, Mira Bhayandar, and Bhopal. And one of the elements of modernization is, of course, tapping into technology to improve your systems and your customer responsiveness. So here are some thoughts. To begin with, as you probably already know, ITS can really unlock the value of your operations, of your services. And it's really a tool for improving your efficiency, the effectiveness of your operations, and becoming more customer responsive. Yeah? And that is the key of ITS. It's not about just technology, it's a tool to enable you to become more efficient and customer responsive. And it's not about trying to appear modern or looking at technology or, just doing it because the others did it. So you have to know what you're looking for up front.
So it's not what size or shape that is important, but what you have to say is what is the intended use of ITS for you as the operator. As a manager, you should be asking when you're looking at GPS, why do you need the GPS? Are you looking at improving your service reliability? Are you looking at using that data to improve your service? Are you looking at providing better information to passengers? And that is the crux of ITS. ITS, MIS projects also can be huge engines or tools for organizational transformation. It involves a strong focus on business processes. So if you did not adapt your business processes to your new system, then much of the benefit and gain is completely lost. For example, there are many situations, Seychelles for example, the bus company has implemented GPS but failed to provide that data either to the operations staff or the traffic controller. So what use is it really and who is it benefiting? Technology in itself cannot fix all the problems. If there are serious problems in terms of decision making, weak management, then technology will not solve this problem, and that should be clear upfront. If your drivers report late to work, or they are rough with customers, or drive rashly, then management action is required, and that's an offline action that needs to be taken, and ITS will not help you. It will help you identify the problem and be able to present that data in that format, but the decision has to be taken by someone else. So let us be clear on what ITS will get you. Every situation is unique and different, so every transport organization should look at their unique needs because they are at different stages of evolution. They have different parts of the operation outsourced, they may be using private operators, etc. And therefore they need to take a deep look at what is it that they want from the ITS system. Quite often you find situations where they're saying, oh, we'll just take what that other city did and we will copy paste, or the consultants are saying, oh, we'll just do whatever the other city did, and that doesn't work very well. Yeah? And this brings us to the need for proper and detailed planning. We must not shortcut this process of planning, because then down the road you are spending a lot more time in all the hiccups that you face during the implementation phase and after. So make the time. The managers should sit and understand what they want from this ITS, and so it starts from what the needs are, and then moving on to priorities, how much it will cost, be very realistic in what is your budget and what you're choosing and the technologies you're choosing, how much it will end up costing. There are situations where bids come in which are way higher than anything that was expected, and everyone's surprised because no one really thought through the entire process. What is it that they really needed? What did they finally end up buying? And it cost a lot more. So this process needs to be done properly. Finally, the value of ITMS comes from the using of it, not from the installation of it. I mean, there are systems that have been bought at some $80 million or $70 million. Are they more effective or useful? Not necessarily, than a 5 million or a 2 million system. So there's food for thought there. Also, the management needs to be an important part of this whole exercise. They need to enable this process through proper assignment of resources, both financial as well as human, because this cannot happen without the right human support. And finally, it's also a continuous process, evolution process. Once you've installed the system, it doesn't mean that you've arrived. There are instances. Zurich, for example, says that after 30 years, they finally feel confident that they are utilizing their system to their full benefit. So it takes a long time, and so we must have patience, and we should not expect that on day one we will be realizing all the benefits that there are to be realized. So really, coming back to planning is important for new operators as well as existing and established operators. So it's not about, oh, we don't need it, we know what there is. And there is a process to be followed. Like I mentioned, look at your operations, what existing systems are in place, what you really need, what are your priorities, develop functional requirements, then get into procurement and implementation. And the more time you spend here getting into the details, that much benefit you will reap downstream. If you look at the operations, typical kinds of problems or improvement areas is, oh, I want, stronger internal controls, or my record keeping is manual, and if there was more data processing and analysis happening of the performance, then things would be far better, or I need real-time customer service for my passengers. The 5 main business process areas where typically you will find ITS MIS solutions being considered is, and you probably already know, is fleet and facilities maintenance, service management, fare collection, customer information and administration. Of these, perhaps the first 2 or 3 are really the core of what bus operators do, which is make sure that the bus is available and can be put on the road to run for service. And if you look at the India situation, it's surprising, but given that it's an emerging IT superpower, very few bus companies have really taken full advantage of these. You may find some established STUs having some kind of fleet and facilities maintenance. Increasingly, there is e-ticketing that you find, attention on fare collection, on customer information. But I think the service management area is still a little bit of and this needs a lot of attention. But by and large, I think all the areas need a lot of attention because we're not even scraping the surface yet. Quickly, Urumqi, just want to share, if you look at the table below, there were a lot of advantages, benefits that were. It had about 2,300 buses. They were able to cut down for the same service level by about 200 buses. They were able to get about a 10% reduction in fuel efficiency. They were able to cut down on dead kilometers. They were able to also cut down significantly on dispatch staff by computerizing and use of IT from a completely manual system to a computerized system. So these are the kinds of things that are achievable through ITS. And these gains of 9 to 10% are not insignificant when we are talking about, the kind of fuel that goes, the kind of costs that are involved. Coming quickly to the Mysore ITS project, which is, talks more from the India context. This was the first of its kind demonstration for a citywide bus service. They have launched this for the entire 500 buses in the city of Mysore. And basically it looks at automatic vehicle location systems and real-time passenger information systems and a control room. What were the key challenges? It was the vendor and the project management consultant came on board late in 2011. And the project is now close to operational acceptance, and it's been a tricky way all along. There have been many challenges, but a huge learning experience. And I feel many of the Indian cities are probably in the same boat, and it would be useful to talk about the challenges and the lessons learned from that perspective. Starting out, it was thought that it would be a 3-phase implementation with 30 tasks, but very soon they realized it was going to be a 4-phase with 185 tasks. So it tells you the kinds of details that were missing up front, or the understanding of the kinds of things that needed to be done. The one big issue that hit them very soon and took a long time to resolve was the fact that the on-record data did not match the field realities. Although it was thought that there were 600 bus stops, by the time everyone visited those bus stops and did a ground check, turned out there were 4 times that number. And it turned out to be 2,400. Added to this, there were frequent changes and ad hoc changes to the route schedule on a continuous basis. I think communication issues are not perhaps just in the domain of public bus operators, but also people like us. All of us face these problems. This was a big challenge, especially when you are using technology to communicate information from the control center to the buses, and there are large places where their network availability is weak or completely absent. What do? How do you, it really compromises the quality of your system. Then power supply at bus stations. If bus stations are managed by the city corporation and you have no control over it, how do you manage the power supply there? Especially if it's been given off on PPP and that PPP contract has gone null and void. So there are a lot of practical issues of how do you manage this urban environment which is not under your control. Added to this, there was vandalism, there was theft of the PIS boards, the batteries, etc., etc. Buses were of a non-standard variety. Stations were of a non-standard variety, so installations took longer and longer because the wiring was different everywhere. And finally, the staff and crew, bringing them on board, complying with or having even laid out standard procedures. Were the business processes laid out? For example, if the system has to recognize there's been a schedule change, it has to be put into the system the night before. And if it's not done that, it shows no information pops up. Or the drivers, cut out the wires. I mean, I think Delhi DTC also encountered a lot of problems of staff and drivers trying to sabotage the system. Coming to lessons learned. So really, more time, 1 minute. Please spend time on the design phase. Get into what you need and how you want to design it. Get into preempting problems and anticipating problems rather than leaving them and those being surprises while you're implementing. It's important that you have strong technical support through the design, procurement, and implementation phase, because this is a sophisticated and complex system and you need that expertise with you. At the same time, you cannot only depend on external agencies, you must have a full-time dedicated team which stays with the project throughout and learns the ropes so that they can take over quickly. Then business processes are key and often overlooked. You must map the business processes early on and how they will change so that they are in the system and you are able to derive benefits. And I want to pose a question. This is something that we need to understand, whether having passenger information system boards and screens at bus stops is a great value add. Because given the environment that we have here and the kind of effort and energy that goes in reinstalling, replacing, managing the theft and vandalism, can this not be more easily supplemented through either the website or the smartphone? That information can be made available through a multiplicity of means. And should we invest so much money at the stations? There are good benefits. Okay. So they are recognizing very good benefits. Mysore is beginning to see they were able to cut down fines that through using the ITS, the number of kilometers run per day is actually less than what they had thought by almost 4%, which is almost 400 kilometers. Bunching incidents have come down rapidly. And even while operating the same number of kilometers in service, they are able to reduce the number of vehicles that they actually need to use. And finally, two very important points that I want to leave you with. One is that there is increasingly this open data that is coming up. And I would encourage, this is the new technology and the new way forward. We must, as operators, increasingly use these open platforms and offer our streams, operational data, through either GTFS or other open standards that are available, because that will help the industry go forward. And the second important point is that we are in this forum where there are so many operators and we are all struggling with similar problems on our ITS systems. Does it not make sense for us to have some working groups or communities of practice around this very complex issue to share learnings, to come together to start having some standardization in the protocols that we use. And that would be a huge benefit. Thank you so much. I'm sorry to take extra time.
Thank you very much. May I request Mr. Hemant Dale now to make his presentation.
Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I will try to be as short as possible to cover up the time which Ms. Gupta had invested here. I'm just trying to touch base a completely new subject which is normally neglected in the transport industry, which is fuel. And I will talk about, like we are talking about the e-ticketing system, e-visa system and everything E. I'm a little bit touching base on the e-fuel systems. So how we can really monitor the fuel consumption, which is one of the very important raw material inputs for operating the STUs. I will just quickly talk about Hectonic. Hectonic is a Swiss German company. We are having 100% owned subsidiary in India. We have over 50 years old company globally. We have a headquarters in Bangalore in India, and we have presence pan-India support for typically, as you know, in all the STU heads are here, in transport industries, the kind of fuel is monitored has been heavily dependent on the public sector oil companies who are the suppliers of your fuel and who also gives you the free facility of setup like dispensing pumps and underground tanks at your STUs. You end up paying upfront to them when they deliver the fuel to you, and then it's your job or your responsibility of the operations of the depots to monitor the day-to-day fuel consumption. What we do is with our systems, we take care of the complete fuel monitoring of the system once the fuel is received. There are very critical parameters which are also need to be monitored, like what is the level of the water in the tank, what is the temperature of the fuel, what is the quality of the fuel. As we have started monitoring on the retail sites, the consumer sites like STUs or the transport departments are not very much aware about it. So this is the typical fuel. You are getting the fuel from the road tankers, which many times, as per our experience in the market, is you end up receiving less fuel on your sites, and then you try to adjust in your inventories every day. This is the overview over the overall fuel management system. You can see that you store the fuel inventory, and then you deliver it to the dispensing pumps or sometimes by the tankers to your buses. This is typically a solution of decantation management, which you can see the truck is coming to your site to deliver the fuel, say 15,000 liters or 16,000 liters. We just try to pass through another legal way of, because currently the method is by dipstick. You just put a dipstick and check it. Every person can measure a dipstick and can be different. The dipstick can be bent, dipstick can be manipulated, and then you end up receiving less fuel in the process. So we have a legal metrology approved flow metering system which we put it there along with our fuel management terminal, so you can see the fuel is monitored continuously, which is going to your tanks, and you know which tanker, for which tank the fuel is going, and you capture that data wirelessly. All our systems are completely wireless. This is because on an industrial site like you are on STUs, to get a connection or to get a proper electricity and supplies is very difficult. You can't run the systems online. So it's also inventory. There is another part of the fuel management. We monitor continuously 24/7 what is your inventory in the fuel, which is very critical to run your fuel the buses. Although we have been talking about from the morning that you have current alternatives of the biodiesel coming with the hybrid, but looking at the global experience, we have to still depend on the diesel or the biodiesel in coming years. And so it's very, very critical to be effectively manage the fuel cost in your sites. So we monitor continuously what is the base segment, what ends up happening, which is not your great skills, but in the tanks, diesel is always comes with the water from the tanker, and then you end up store the water in the tank. The tanks are very old, so these are freely provided to you. Who knows there is a hole in that MS tank, and the night time when the operation is not there, the fuel is getting into the ground. So what we can monitor here is we can continuously monitor the leak detection system. If the fuel is really inside the tank, if there is any change of the levels, when the station is not in the operation. So we can see that, monitor that continuously, and it's again wirelessly monitored. You can also order the fuel whenever the fuel is less, automatically to the oil companies. So this is the system. This is typically what you see on your fueling site or the depot, where you are having the buses coming in. So you have currently you have a couple of people managing that. One is who is the fueling actually the bus, another person who is recording it, another person feeding all the data in the PC on the Excel file and sending it to the respective regional offices. So we have our system which completely works on a wireless nozzle. All the trucks are fitted with the on the vehicle tank inlet with the RFID tag, so which recognizes which bus number, which driver also it can recognize, what type of fuel is diesel, petrol or biofuel, it recognizes that. It also allows to fix a specific quota, and that quota has been fixed, and then you can fuel it completely. So what we make sure is only authorized fueling is done on the sites. There is no chance of unauthorized fueling on the sites, and we monitor each and every bus fueling, and also we monitor the ultimately what you are interested is to monitor what is the performance of vehicle, what is the kilometer per hour. If your target is say 4 km per hour for the bus, then we also can generate the reports continuously that what is your performance. This is another solution which you are not using, I am sure, but this is also another way of fueling. You can also fuel by using tankers, where bus need not come all the way to the depots if it is not necessary. So you can also designate the diesel bowsers to a specific location, and you can also fuel, and this kind of RFID will be there in the tank, and you can also fuel it like we fuel in the dispensing stations, and everything is completely sent to the back office automatically. These are few reports. You can see also there is one report from KSRTC where we had done a pilot in Bangalore and with the Volvo buses, and you can see we are monitoring very accurately what is the kilometer performance, and it gives you completely crosses reports. What is at what time, how many in decimals, how many liters have been fueled, and so on. So there are overall benefits you can see. You can get total transparency and accountability in the system of fueling only to authorized vehicles. One of the things in the morning which I think MD of KSRTC was mentioning, and some few delegates, that it is very difficult to manage to be profitable with the state transport units. And I think so you have to be always very, very clear on the accurate on the cost which you are spending, and fuel being about 30 to 40% daily operating cost. I think this can help you a lot. Also the safety issue is being taken care. There is no spillage during fueling. Then the fuel can be taken only through the automation. You can monitor the fuel by sitting here, how much fuel is going to say Varanasi depot, or how much fueling is going to Jhansi or whichever location. The refilling limits can be fixed based on the number of trips the driver makes. These are some of the references which we have globally. This is the government of Brussels, about 1,000 buses, 4 depots we have automated. This is in Wallen, 800 buses, 500 buses. In Belgium, you can see 2,500 to 400 buses, 56 depots automated. This is Luxembourg. In India, we are not new. In India, we are present for the last 10 years, and we have already equipped our RFID on 10,000 fleets, and we are monitoring currently 10,000 fleets with our RFID solution on the fuel management solution. We have so far we were focused on the mines, steel companies, cement companies. Now we are diverting our also attention to the transport industry. So you can see all the clients like Jindal, Sri Cement, Vedanta, Tatas, everybody is our client. There is also another apprehension which we have seen in the transport industry, that what we are monitoring is the fuel which is going to the buses. But after the buses fuel has been fueled, what happens next if there has been siphoned out? So we are also currently doing some pilots for the anti-siphoning system on the every buses, and we can also monitor online on the buses how much is the fuel if there is a siphoning happening on the way after the fueling is done. So we have more than 100 bowsers in India in 60 stationary depots, 10,000 fleets are equipped. We have 50 turnkey solutions. So that's it from my side. I think I made it in a short. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I will be happy to give you any answers later on. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We've heard 4 speakers. I was supposed to be a speaker, but I'm here as a stepney or a spare wheel as a chairman because the original chairman didn't come. So I will not make concluding remarks. Can I have my presentation here? Can someone help me with that? Okay, thank you. So, well, what have the speakers been? One main message which is coming through is that it appears that many of us have a solution and we're looking for problems to apply the solution to. So someone has have a BRT and you go to any city and put one line in there. Many of us have ITS, then we have to look where can we put this ITS. And so, unfortunately, it doesn't work all the time because you must have a problem and see which of the 7 solutions suit you. Most of us have got used to giving sermons like priests in a church. So everyone sits quietly, doesn't listen to the sermon, but the church is full. We are not discussing data. I'm very happy that we had you discussing some experience from an Indian city. We are not discussing what Indian cities are like. The problem is that suppose you have a house in which cockroaches creep out from here and there are a few leaks from the ceiling here and there, then you make all your lights, your refrigerator, everything work on your smartphone. And then you try to sell it. No one will buy that house. But we have a house phone without any smart without any smart solution, but without cockroaches, and is clean, a lot of people will buy it. And unless we understand this, we are not going to solve Indian city problems. And if you want to solve Indian city problems, please understand the Indian city. Delhi has the highest proportion of cars in India. But in Delhi, only 15% of the trips or less are by car. So even if 30% of the cars shift to public transport, you only get a 5% shift. So we are talking rubbish in a sense. Because if you have Greater New York, where 55% of the trips are cars, and 25% shift, you get a huge shift. In all the other Indian cities, less than 6-7% of the trips are by cars. So what are you going to shift? Actually, there's a huge demand of people who are under 18 and cannot have a license, which is a huge proportion in India, who want to use public transport, but can't. Similarly, elderly people. So we're not talking about the people who want to use, we're talking to people who will not use. And so, right now, the issue is not just shifting people from cars at all. And if we improve things for the others, some of these car users might shift on their own. You don't have to preach to them. And so this is a very important issue. Secondly, if you look at the data, there are no Indian cities with a central business district. All transport research in the world has been done from the West, especially Europe, where cities have, and Japan, which have very important central business districts, and therefore the concepts of public transport. Not only do Indian cities not have central business districts, but all expansion is not taking place in the center of the city. It's taking place on the periphery of the city. So we will never ever have central business districts in Indian cities. We will never have concentrated business districts in Indian cities. So then we start talking about TOD. TOD is a 117-year-old idea, or 124-year-old idea from the US, where there was no one living there. And so you had to put some businesses and homes near the station. The most famous city from US for TOD is from Oregon, where the density is 14 people per hectare, 1-4. There is no Indian city which has a density of less than 100 persons per hectare. We talk about Barcelona, it has half the density of Delhi. So if you have a very high density, you don't need TOD. And so we have to stop talking about public transport as a project. If you have to make BRTs, they have to be a part of the city bus system. If they are not part of the city bus system, they will remain projects. So we'll go to every city, make a cross with a BRT, or maybe one more line, and the rest of the 100 lines will remain neglected. So therefore, we should stop talking about our golden standard of the BRT. So the issue is, if this is what your road looks like, I don't care what ITS you put there. I don't care what a beautiful bus you put there. It won't move. So this has to do with the design of the road. The bus can't move. The bus can't move, no matter the fanciest technology. So the first principle is to think of public transport with a reserved lane, irrespective of what goes on it. You can have jeepneys, you can have tuk-tuks, you can have whatever as public transport, as long as they have a reserved lane. And that there is a very important issue, that if you want people to use public transport, it must have a high frequency. So in all our cities, if you include tuk-tuks, jeepneys and so on as public transport, then every Indian city has more public transport than any European city. The proportion of people using public motorized transport. So there is no shortage of public transport in Indian cities, depending how you define it. The question is how to make this existing system more efficient. We have more people bicycling and walking in all Indian cities as a proportion than most European cities because of poverty. The question is, how do you make life nicer for existing people? If you make life nicer for existing people, others might join you. And I think unless we understand the numbers, and we understand and do our studies in our own cities, taking sentences which are very fashionable from all over the world, and talking about them without understanding the numbers is not going to solve the problem. Look at numbers. If 60% or 70% or 80% of vehicles in our cities are motorcycles, the marginal cost of running a motorcycle is 1 rupee a kilometer, which is 2 cents, 2 American cents a kilometer. Therefore, all public transport fares in India are regulated by this number. No private operator runs a private public transport system where the fare is more than 1 rupee a kilometer. If you charge more than 1 rupee a kilometer, you lose business. No decent bus system can run on 1 rupee a kilometer anywhere in the world. And therefore, if you want to run city-wide, I'm not talking of 2 gold standards or 3 gold standard lines in a city. If you want to run a city-wide bus system at 1 rupee a kilometer, you better start thinking of city taxation, which we don't have in India. Because getting money from the central government or the state government for public transport is non-sustainable. Unless citizens of each city pay tax for this system, it is not sustainable in the long run. And at 1 rupee a kilometer, we'll have to start thinking of much cheaper, efficient systems. And therefore, I'd like to just say that don't worry about any standard for the BRT for the time being. Make reserved lanes, whether it's a narrow road, slightly wider road, and so on. We don't have to worry about the fancier stations. People are not using public transport because they don't have gleaming things. They're not using it because it's not available. Secondly, this is the most difficult thing to solve in countries like India, that if you have gated communities and colonies and large campuses, then the distance to the bus stop remains very far. Unless public transport can go through our gated communities And large campuses like all our software offices are huge. You get off the bus, you have to walk in a long distance. Or you have to wait a long time for the connection for whatever you do. We have colonies where we close all the gates and use all the roads for parking and not for movement. So if you want the bus or the metro to come close to where you live, we'll have to do something about this system of gated communities. Please look at your map. Your map cannot tell you the shortest route to go somewhere because the gates are closed. So your Google map doesn't work to give you the shortest distance. My Google map gave me the wrong directions to come here. So unless we start thinking properly in detail with numbers, we are not going to get very far. So therefore, what do we do with what is, I would stop calling it a BRT. I would say let's have efficient bus systems. Where possible, have a BRT-like thing. Where not possible, do something different, as long as the bus can move, or a tuk-tuk can move. Because if you put large buses and reduce the frequency to 1 every 20 minutes, it's not going to work, because the tuk-tuk was going every 3 minutes. So frequency is most important for attraction to public transport. And if the frequency is high, you don't need information systems as much. You need information systems become very important when the bus comes in 25 minutes. So you want to know whether it's coming in 20 minutes or in 30 minutes. But if it's going every 5 minutes, I don't need that information. In Europe, I don't use it if the bus is frequent. So, but ITS is there. Okay. So let's look into the future so we can design something correct for our system, say 10 years from now. And it will take 10 years to do something like this, and it's feasible. So we say we are going to run our system in platoons with large buses, small buses, vans, controlled by intelligent, almost driverless, a modification of the Google's driverless car, without the expensive technology like the LiDAR in the Google car, which costs $60,000. It may cost $10,000 10 years from now. When you do this, then we can run our system in platoons, and when you come to junctions, the smaller vehicles in the platoon can take off on the minor roads and get to your destination so that people don't have to change buses or vehicles. So let's not take current fashions. If we want to do this for our country, let's plan for the future and start building from now. Let's give contracts to 20 people to design such systems. Test them out, and maybe within the next 10 years, we'll get it. And not worry so much about what is fashionable, what looks sexy, because people are not looking for, believe me, they're not looking, my students are not looking for a sexy bus system. They're looking for a bus system which is easy to use. And so we get stuck from fashion shows because they look glamorous. I also like fashion shows, at least on television. Lumen invites me to the real one. But the issue is, how do we get to this stage eventually without just thinking of bus projects as projects which people become famous on, either as national experts or international experts? Can ordinary bus companies in every city start doing it on their own? That's sustainable. With help, international help. I know everything I know is with international help, so I'm not against international help. All I'm suggesting is, let us start looking at numbers much more than we have. Let us start looking at what is happening in our cities. Let's start looking at what the city structure is. We have just done a survey of car and motorcycle use in India. In Delhi, everyone calls it a sprawling city. The average car kilometer per day is less than European cities, which are much smaller. That means Delhi is not operating as one large sprawling city. Delhi is operating as a large number of cities within a city. Most people don't know 90% of Delhi. They live within their own area. And so, if this is how our cities are growing, as large cities within cities, then the problem of transport is slightly easier. My suspicion is that the future public transport will have to be medium capacity, not high capacity. Because if you make a high capacity system, you're making it more expensive, then you have to attract people from wider distances. It should be medium capacity but a dense system, so it comes closer to your home with a high frequency. Keep it low speed, so that average speeds of cars and your public transport door to door remains at 15 kilometers an hour. Then you have a choice. That means the bus has to go slightly faster than cars. If we make it smooth for cars, only stupid people use public transport. So a car has to go the same speed door to door as a bus. Therefore, let's not remove congestion. Let's make congestion for cars predictable. That is, it takes you 15 minutes every day, not 5 minutes one day and half an hour the other day. And if you make it easier for cars, forget public transport. So cars have to be in congestion at 15 kilometers an hour. And buses and tuk-tuks and rickshaws, everyone has to be a smooth flow wherever it is, in whatever design. So that's the first step. And otherwise, we will keep having these seminars and competing with each other on what's good. I think we have to have an agreement that the systems of the future will have to be hugely flexible and changeable. Because our cities are going to change much more than the current European cities, because we are becoming richer and bigger in cities. So the character of cities will keep changing. So the systems we install must be changeable in time if we want to make them efficient. Otherwise, we'll lose a lot of money putting in infrastructure which is not changeable. And I'll stop with that so that we have another 15 minutes for questions and answers, and I will not make any concluding remarks. So, questions please from anyone. Any of the panelists, except me. Yes? Yes, sir. And please name who per person you want to ask the question from, and your identity.
Oh, okay. My name is Ram Shekhar. I work for Delhi Integrated Multimodal Transit Systems, and this is for each one of you on the panel. I don't know who is going to answer this. You talked of innovations. Is there any system in the world where there is a city-level regulator who would fix the service standards for public transportation, who would also ensure that there is a flow of money in order to, keep the system running? Is there any such system, or is it something that is left to the political will and for people to really to play with? Of course, this works in the political economy space. Is that the beginning and end of it? We tried with the regulatory system in many instances. The sort of experience has been mixed. But has there been any move in this particular space? Thank you.
Since you raised the issue, why don't you answer that? Regulatory system.
Well, I think the majority of cities in the world has a regulated sector. First, it started that in many countries and many cities in the world, public transport need subvention. I would not call it subsidy, I would call it compensation from the government. So you will not find any city in Europe where the revenues from fares will cover the expenses. So it's always the government what jumps in. And that's right. Because if a government supports healthcare, if a government supports education, to my opinion it should also support public transport and mobility, because it's a basic need for everybody. Yeah, we had a strike yesterday or tomorrow in London. Yeah, if there's no public transport, the whole economy is suffering. So it's a public need. So any government with common sense will bring in money into the public transport system. And why should governments put money in highways and not in public transport? I never understand why public money should go in roads but not in public transport. So if we look from New York to Paris, or Singapore bus, or other cities, yes, there is going public money and there is a regulator. And because there is public money in, it's taxpayers' money, you have to be 100% sure this money is spent well and that quality is delivered. So you have to regulate it. But I would say it rather in the opposite side. India is probably one of the few countries where there is not a sound funding in place for public transport operations. India is probably the only country in the world where we don't subsidize public transport operations, but we subsidize the purchase of buses, which is a completely different concept from any other.
Hello, my name is Jay Prakash. I am a Transport Operator Association, private sector. In India, the Competition Act has come into force, but unfortunately not properly implemented. There should be a healthy competition, so two-tier system should be there, that is public and private sector. As you rightly stated, subsidized facility is given for public sector only, but lack of such facility to private entrepreneurs. The law is there for coexistence. In some states in India, there is coexistence of public and private. Public transport means here only, they refer only to public transport undertaking. Public transport includes private sector also in operation. There should be a healthy competition and fair structure. There is a lot of discrimination in fair structure. Wherever exclusive monopoly is there by the public sector, they have hiked the fare like anything. Wherever there is a cooperation, they have reduced the fare only with an intention to eliminate the competitor. It is happening in some of the southern states. Now the government has felt it necessary to avoid this feeding of by means of subsidized facility. That law, if it is come in the way implemented, definitely commuters will be benefited much better. Without siphoning the taxpayers' money to some sector, care may be taken if government think of framing a policy as in the foreign countries. There should be coexistence. See, whoever gives better service, definitely public will get the benefit.
Thank you very much.
I have got lot of evidence that some of STUs are without paying tax. It's a huge burden. And in legislators have lost sight of that. The taxpayers' money has been siphoned for some other purpose. So this all thing can be brought into control.
I think what you have raised is a very important issue, but I don't think any of us can really give you a satisfactory answer. But there are many people in the audience who really know a lot about what you're talking about. So why don't you talk to them in the tea break? Next question.
Yes, I will give you a lot
yes,
of...
Sir.
One more request, sir. Only small.
There's not much time. Can we give another person a chance?
Okay.
My name is Tees Kumar. I am from State Transport Haryana. my friend has raised the issue of subsidizing public transport in
Okay, we
government
have a
sector.
question for the panelists. Because you can
I
discuss
just
with
want
them.
to give the information. We are subsidizing 36 categories which are getting concession. Either the people start paying for the services which they are availing, otherwise subsidy has to be there.
Thank you. Any other question? Yes, sir, at the back.
Percentage share of use of roads for public transport and private transport.
I think I'll. Actually,
Yes,
that's not a.
you were touching it. You were touching it.
That's not a fair question in the sense we don't do it by share of road. You have to do it by proportion of people using non-personalized vehicles, and therefore, if they the issue is of solutions. Its solution is that you would be very stupid to use public transport if it is slower than using your own motorcycle. Okay. So therefore, to make it fair, the amount of time you take to use a car from your doorstep to your office should be the same as using public transport. And if you have to do that, then public transport vehicles, while cruising, have to go faster than cars. There is no other way. And that's why the metro, because it is underground, can go faster than cars, because there is nothing in its way. So unless we do that, we cannot have a fair play on the surface. Whether the metros are good or not is not the question. The issue is that in Delhi, if we take cost of capital, include it in cost of running the Delhi metro, then we are subsidizing every metro passenger by 35,000 rupees a year. If you have to subsidize every metro passenger by 35,000 rupees a year, you will not be able to give that transport to most people in the country. Therefore, we have to have other solutions which cost subsidy of only 10,000 rupees a year or 5,000 rupees a year by taxation. And when you do that and you you reserve space for whatever kind of public transport you wish. I don't want to define that. In some cities, it may be small vehicles. In some cities, it may be articulated buses. In some routes, it may be something else. But as long as you can keep the frequency high on the reserved lane, you've served your purpose. And on other roads, you don't have reserved lanes, where the distances are shorter. So, I mean, these are complicated issues, and your question is the way it's being raised about proportion of road space. Proportional road space is not the issue. Speed is the issue.
No, it's not the space I said. I said the percentage used. Today, the situation is that private vehicles are pushing out the public vehicles.
I understand that. But they will not push it out if you have a reserve lane. The issue is, how do you make something move? That's all. And if you can find a way of making any kind of public vehicle which includes all kinds of vehicles, how do we make them move? And we have to use our brains for the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years to start doing and experimenting. We don't have solutions easily. Yes, sir. Yes, in the center. Can you use the phone, microphone, please? Identity.
Hello? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm Nico. The question is for you, and apologize since you specifically asked not to be asked a question, but primarily I think it was a very thought-provoking talk. You defined two axes, cost and the time to travel, as the variables to design your transportation system. Would your model be a little different if you take a third variable, which is the impact to the environment, because that, I believe, is also an equally important axis to be considered? And would that model still hold true if you take that axis into account?
I think the impact for the environment goes without mentioning it almost. You have to consider it because it affects your health no matter what. But then you have to calculate emissions per person, not emissions per vehicle. And so, for example, we have just had, for the National Transport Policy, we had TERI calculate CO2 emissions by the Delhi Metro per passenger and the diesel bus in Delhi. It turns out that the total CO2 emissions per metro passenger for the Delhi Metro is more than the diesel bus per passenger. Because if you take all the transmission of electricity, the production of CO2 at the power station, etc. So these are a little more complicated issues, but we have to work them out.
Right. No, actually, my question was a little more because you mentioned tuk-tuks and all the other smaller vehicles. The pollution per passenger would be significantly higher than, let's say, an electric bus or an electric car, privately owned electric car or a privately owned electric bus going on that corridor, which you define for public use, could be, the impact would be a lot significantly.
Actually, I'm not so sure, because with current engines, and that's where you should work on, that is, we're not paying attention to the millions of public transport vehicles in our towns. How do we, in the next 5 years, 10 years, in a reasonable way, make their engines slightly cleaner? For example, a van taking 10 people, a 10-year-old diesel van taking 10 people to their job produces less pollution than one Mercedes owned by a rich person, because there's only one person in the Mercedes and there are 10 people in the old diesel van. And so the diesel van is producing 5 times more pollutants, but there are 10 people in it. So we have to look at justice in a way, because if you increase the cost of that van, and you can't take 10 people, and the fare goes up 3 times, they'll start using the motorcycles. So I think all of us have to bring our heads together and start looking at very, very serious numbers. Yes, sir. I think we'll have 3 more.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Mrityunjaya. I'm a software consultant from Bangalore. In and around NCR, as you said correctly, and
ask a question from a panelist.
See, to Dinesh sir, question is for Dinesh sir. And as you said rightly, there is a dedicated line is required for public transport, for mass bus transport. See, currently what is happening, and we are all seeing in around example of NCR only, where suppose bus to be stopped at a station or private cars are stopped there. First we need to avoid that. After we need to think of dedicated line. That's what I feel. How you are planning to dedicated line? Because if you are saying dedicated line, then car wala aega, tantam wala aega, sab, they are trying to sneak. So what is your plan and how you are planning to implement and execute and deliver it? And what is the timeline?
No, I don't have a timeline. If you say we don't know how to make people stop at a red light, then forget it. Let everyone do what they feel like. If we have a system and you say we can't make it work, then let's not have anything. So you have to decide that we have to make certain things work. We are not monkeys. Monkeys behave better. So Indians are like anyone else in the world. And if you have a system which you show works, they'll behave like anyone else. So we have to have some pride in ourselves that we can make things work. And the matter ends there. We can't debate this issue of Indians being horrible endlessly. At least it must stop before I die. Yes, sir, one more.
Hi, my name is Srinivas. The question is regarding participatory planning with citizens. The issue in major cities is I don't know which division of the government to approach if I have a particular issue. Again, is there a place within the policy framework to include this? I'm not sure if there is one right now.
I think, can the 2 of you try it? Or?
I think they're trying to do it in
Your mic is not on, ma'am.
Just speak closer to it.
Well, it's being tried out. It's, I think, still a far way off in the country, but there are, you're beginning to hear of the innovations of Janagraha in Bangalore, of what the RWAs in Delhi are doing. So in a way, that is what they're facilitating. But obviously,
She switched it on.
very initial stages.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll repeat that. Well, you're beginning, in India, it's a very new area still, right? I mean, I don't think citizens are, in general, very engaged in public matters, but there are, in the larger metros, we are beginning to see some forums which are coming up increasingly. In Bangalore, you have Janagraha, which has initiated this ward-level planning, etc., engaging citizen groups. In Delhi, you see the RWAs, which are becoming active in this planning process. So you're beginning to see that happen. But obviously it's a slow process and a long way to go.
Just to make it clear, the issue is with the policy framework. Citizens are not involved within the policy framework. Like when you see a state transport unit, the central government has a stake in it, say 40%. The state transport unit has a stake, 60%. Citizens have no role in it. Can we bring in a policy framework, make it an act for independent directors or citizen representatives, which is not there and which is quite needed in cities?
I think it's an important suggestion. I think all the people who run bus systems in India are sitting here, and they'll take note of it. Is that, have we run out of time? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And thank you all.
Thank you, Session Chair. I think we've had, and thank you to our expert panel. We have diverse views, and especially as Session Chair has given us completely different perspective and enough food for thought. Thank you so much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, before we conclude this session, may I request Professor Mohan to kindly present mementos to all our speakers in this session, starting with Ms. Gupta. Mr. Guido Bergerman. And to Mr. Hemant Tahale. May I now request Mr. Anand Rao to kindly present a memento to Professor Mohan. Thank you, Mr. Rao. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank all our speakers for this session.